You're listening to the Dating Orange podcast, and this is a special 4-part series on Jennie's Law, a proposed law that could change how safe dating and relationships are for women and men in Ireland. Back in 2021, 24-year-old Jennifer Poole was murdered by her ex-partner, a man who had previously been convicted of assault causing harm to another former partner. Since then, her brother Jason has been campaigning for a domestic violence register, a system that could help protect people entering new relationships by making past convictions visible. Over these 4 episodes, we will hear from Jason himself and from 3 women across Ireland who have experienced abuse in relationships, and what Jennie's Law could mean for the future of dating and safety. Because while this podcast is usually about the weird and wonderful side of dating, this week is about something much more important: keeping people safe while they are out there dating. In this episode, we hear from Sasha, a young woman who was brutally assaulted by her boyfriend in 2023. Unlike many before her, Sasha went the legal route and fought for justice. Several women had tried and failed to stand up to the same man, silenced by fear and harassment. Sasha recognises that a law like Jennie's Law could give women the courage and strength to come forward and see their cases through.
I always knew him, so he was older than me. He's 10 years senior to me. He'd been friendly with neighbours of mine growing up and such. And I'd been friends with his brothers, we'd grown up in the same friends group, and his brother is actually engaged with one of my best friends. So there'd been a cross link there as well. We got together. We'd always been on the same night scenes and stuff. So we were always in the same circles as such. But in between, say, his relationships or mine, there was always a thing, but there was never anything serious until 3 years ago. And we actually said that we'd give it a go. It didn't start off on the best of circumstances anyways, because I had just been in a relationship with one of his best friends and was swiped, you could say. So that wasn't the best of starts anyways. I had been told all of the rumours. I just didn't believe them, because you'd hear one story and hear the next. And like that, there was, when you'd ask these women, was there any truth to it? They were too afraid to talk about his name, really. They didn't want to poke the bear, as one of the other women said. We'd been in that relationship for about 6 months, and it got very, very serious very, very quickly. And he became very, very possessive. Very quickly, he started to isolate me, tell me my family didn't love me, that they didn't even want me, that my friends, they were fake, that they only wanted me when they needed me for something. It started like that, little ticks for tat, and tried to slowly but surely it started to work, and I started to be isolated. I started to pull back from everyone and everything. Then work was becoming a problem for him. He couldn't stand to see me go to work and be successful in my job, because it was a job in the public. I'm a hairdresser. He didn't know who I'd be encountering day to day, and that really, really rattled him. Then I suppose it started with, he was going through my phone a lot and picking odd messages from, I remember one example actually, where my cousin had rang me at 4 a.m, like he regularly does, because he was drunk, and he just calls for the drunken chat. And I remember, because I didn't answer, to avoid drama, that he insisted that I had to ring my cousin back at 4 a.m. to make sure that it was all innocent, Because my cousin texted me, said, "Hey hun," with an X, that he thought that he was trying to slide in the DMs. It was ridiculously bad. Then he would invite my friends over and play so Mr. Nicey Nicey in front of my friends. But the minute that my friends would even say one joke to him in my defence, that was it. He'd erupt and they'd all have to get and go. And then I'd be left to deal with the consequences. I couldn't even look in another person's direction for too long, because I'd look back and he'd be staring at me intensively, I suppose, though, the night that it really got bad, it was in 2003 or 2023, and it was in October, and it was just like any other normal night. Now, we'd been bickering the night before, but nothing major. We had decided that we were going to go and get a few drinks, just to I suppose, lighten up the mood or whatever. Bear in mind, so he was waiting to get his license back on the Sunday, And this was on the Saturday. He had his license taken off of him for dangerous driving prior to this. So he was waiting to get his license back after, I think, a 3-year ban. And he had 1 day to wait. And I'd gone into the shop. I drove in and I'd gone into the shop and I left him in the car with the ignition on, not thinking. When I came back out, he had swapped over and took control of the car. And I said to him, like, it's all seen on CCTV. When I came out of the shop and I seen him in the driver's side, I said to him, would you not just wait the day? Like, if the guards had seen him that day, like, there would be no license back and they would have made it their mission just to pull him out and take it. Like, you know what I mean? He was known to the guards anyways, you know? So they would have known his face. They'd be looking for him, knowing that the license would be coming back. He'd be itching to go. I said to him, I said, could you not just wait the day? You know what they'll do if they see you. Next one, he said, shut up and get in the car before you get me locked up again. So I got in the car. What else could you do in that situation? We weren't 2 minutes out the road and I got the first thump into the face. And he was insisting that I was a big problem. I was all of this. You can't just keep your mouth shut. I'm worse than the guards, trying to basically control him. All of this. I was only doing it for his own good. But anyways, and that's when it all really started, where he took me for what should have been a 10-minute spin back to his house. He took me around the mountainside, around Slieve for a 2-hour prolonged assault where I was trying to throw myself out the car and he was pulling me back in. There was at one point where I actually managed to escape and he dragged me back into the car. He was hitting me going down the roads. He was driving absolutely crazy. He bit me 5 times in the car, my arms, down my back, everything. So that was going on ages and there was just thumps constantly flying, whether it was kicks, thumps, I was hit with my phone so much that it actually broke across my face. We got back to his house and I ran in and I tried to grab my bag and I was grabbing all of my bits as much as I could. And when he came in, he locked the door and that was it. He locked the door and it just became more vicious. He picked up, like a number 7 Boots mirror, the handheld kind of ones, they're round. He picked that up and he actually broke it over me until he got me to the floor and hit me. When I was on the floor, he kept kicking me, stamping on my head, everything. Then I was trying to climb out of windows. Now, bear in mind, he's only 5 meters from his family home as well. And they were probably there and hearing all of this. Because I was screaming, I was screaming. I'm a mother of 2 kids. That's what I kept begging him. I kept saying, please let me go home to my children. He told me that the only person I'd see that night, and I'd be lucky if I seen him, was my father, who was dead 21 years. He told me he'd burn my mother and my kids alive in the house if I did survive, that I'd only have days to go, and that every day, even if I managed to survive, that my days would be numbered. Hit me with anything and everything that he could find or throw at me. Then at one point, I was so winded and badly hurt after him hitting me with the mirror and stamping on me for the guts of I'd say 40-minute assault. I really don't know how I lived through it, to be honest with you, because he actually he banged my head as well, right by the temple here, about 5 times off the bottom of the door of the car where it's all metal. He had banged my head off that as well at one point where he was trying to drag me in and out of the car. Then anyways, I was on the floor and I just remember in the fetal position, kind of trying to protect myself. He had gone into the bathroom at this point and he was giving out about his own face, where I must have scratched his face in self-defense. And he was saying, look what you've done to my face. I have probation in the morning. They're going to know about this now. How can I defend myself? How can I proclaim my innocence, basically? And that's all I could remember. And I was trying to get my breath and I was trying to get up on to try and get gone. Or I was trying to stand again and just get up anyways off the floor, because I knew if I stayed on the floor, I was definitely dead. But when he came out of his bathroom, I've never seen a man anything. It was animalistic now. After the bites and everything, I thought this was it. I thought he was done with his moaning in the bathroom. But no, he came out, he took his jumper off and his top off and he came lunging at me. It was like a man. I can't even explain it. It was like a bare knuckle boxing match, and he just took the top off and he came lunging at me, swing for swing for swing. I was so quick I couldn't defend myself. So once again, I'd fallen back down. And that continued on, I'd say, for another hour and a half until he had exhausted himself to the point that he threw the key at me and just said, just go. Just go. And I got in my car. I knew I couldn't come home. I knew I couldn't come back to my house and show my children the state that I was in. So I had to go to my best friend's house, who it was awkward for her too, because obviously, as I said earlier, she is engaged to his brother. But she knew, and she could see the damage clearly that was pumping through me. So she actually brought me to hospital then and there. And yeah, I spent that night in the hospital getting tests done and everything. And I couldn't come home after the assault for at least 4 days until some of the bruising had gone down, because I had head swelling, I had concussion, I was dizzy. My ribs were so bruised that I actually couldn't pick my youngest son up for, I would say, 4 weeks. My mother had to take time off work because I couldn't manage the two kids alone. Their father had to pitch in as well and come and help, which was actually more embarrassing for me as well, you know. It was a horrible time, like, and I just do think, like, if Jennie's law was in place, because like I had said, I had heard stories of him, like, you know, he was known. We'd known him all our lives. We'd heard these stories. I'd gotten warning, but without the actual evidence in front of you, sure, you could say anything about anyone and, you know, you wouldn't judge them until you got it literally smacked in the face, you know? So I had known one of his exes, her mother had worked with my mother years ago, and she was young and she has a child with him. And she had had an awful time with him. I'd heard that. That's all I'd heard. She had an awful time with him and that he had harassed her. And which is actually, which I now know later from going through the courts and everything with it, that was the only charge he ever got for any woman that he had ever assaulted or provoked or whatever, was the harassment charge. And after that harassment charge was apparently when he got much, much worse with her, because he then felt that, like, he didn't believe that she was going to go to the guards about this. But when she had her child, she had to protect herself and the child, obviously, from him, and put some boundary in place, because this man isn't capable of keeping a boundary. But that's all I'd ever really heard, was that she had an awful time and that he was kind of like stalking, kind of turning up unannounced to their house and property. But when I asked him about this, he said, that was for my child. I wanted to see my child. So he said then with the next woman who he was with and had another child with, apparently he had caused damage to one of their properties where he'd broken windows. And when I asked about that, he said once again he was bringing nappies to the child and her father and brothers came out and it got messy. And then as for the third woman, she was just kind of like myself, a girlfriend. And I know now from speaking with her now that she told me that she didn't want to poke the bear. She wanted to reach out and warn me, but she didn't want to poke the bear. So that's all I'd really heard. You know, you don't really get much stories, because like that, they'd all been intimidated. All of these women had tried to press charges, should I say, and he had further intimidated them to not. The week after it happened to me, I sat there and I stared, didn't sleep a wink. I was absolutely terrified. Every car that went by my house, I was in a panic. I was up and I was thinking, and I was overthinking and overthinking and overthinking until it got to the point, it was the Friday after. So this had happened on a Saturday. We were coming up to the week and I just felt sick. I felt so worn down and sick and with panic and dread that I thought, I can't live like this. I cannot live like this. And I said, if I get the opportunity, I will definitely go in and report. So I wasn't actually capable of actually walking into the station was the last thing. You know, I wanted to be able to walk and pick up my child's shower. I couldn't even have a shower properly, you know, that's how injured I was. But I suppose it got to the Saturday and I got a text off one of my friends. Now her brother would be friendly with the ex as well. And the brother was living in Cavan. Now we're from Roscommon, but he had ran to Cavan after doing this to me, thinking that he wouldn't have been found. But that man who he ran to in Cavan, I'm very good friends with her sister, and her mother was living in Cavan across the road from the house he ran to, and she knew. So when he ran there, she texted me to say she had eyes on him. So I knew where he was then and there. I knew he wasn't in the county. So that's when I made my move and I went to the guards and I filed in the complaint. And that next morning, it took 3 different jurisdictions of Gardaí. They put a plan into place. They raided the home house and Cavan at the same time. And they got him in Cavan. And then they took him back up to Roscommon, where he was placed on remand until June of this year, where he was sentenced to 4 years. But 4 years, considering he'd already served on remand, he'd done, I think, 1.5 years at this point. So we're only looking at maybe 11 or 12 months since June. That's all he'll have to serve, and he'll be out again. While I was at my friend's house for the few days when I couldn't return home, and he hadn't been reported at this point, and he knew where I was because obviously they're in the same circle, word was going around. I had no phone because he had smashed it over me. He had been texting my friend telling her to say he loves me and he's sorry and all of this. Even when we went to trial in June, he pleaded not guilty and he told the judge that he was going to appeal it before he was even sentenced. The evidence was handed over, thank God. But, you know, that's really and truly the only thing that kind of got him, that got me my justice, shall we say, if we can call it that. And then he got up into court and he tried to make out that I was on OnlyFans and everything, and this is why he'd done it. I was never near OnlyFans or anything, but he was just trying to further humiliate me, you know. Everything was to just put a knife in me every step of the way. Suppose he tried to let on that he was suicidal, that he had psychiatric problem, but when the psychiatric report came back, there was no issues, you know. Tried to make out that he was touched as a child by one of his own relations that he had actually assaulted previously. They tried to justify that attack by saying that he was actually touched by that man. Oh, shame. But you know what's worse as well? Unfortunately, like, his family are good people, but it surprised me to see them support him through that. Because they know me, they know my family. Our mothers as well had worked alongside each other at one point. I have a son, and that's the only thing I think of every day. But that's one thing I'll raise him not to be. You know, you hear the stories, you hear the rumors, but yet everyone around him is still just so accepting of him. So if everyone is just so welcoming and accepting, it's hard to believe all the stories, and especially when you ask him about them and he directly answers you, and the answers do sound half normal, you know, that, oh, well, I was angry, my child I'm alienated. And you nearly start to have sympathy for him until you actually become the victim, you know. So I think with Jennie's law, definitely there'll be a lot of women saved by this. In a few weeks, he'll be out and he can do what he wants.
Sasha's abuser will be out of prison in around 46 weeks, but because he committed the crime and was sentenced before Jennie's law takes effect, he won't be on the register. As Jason Poole explained in the last episode, when he spoke about the case of Owen O'Brien, who stabbed his ex-girlfriend Niamh Kelly more than 50 times and was sentenced to 14 years in prison, Owen too won't appear on the register. Sasha's case was never covered by the media, so it can't be found online. When her abuser walks free, there'll be no public record of what he's done. And that's exactly what Jennie's law aims to change, making sure that this type of dangerous and violent history is never hidden again.
There was one article, all right, that went up and it said that a man with 11 months was sentenced over harassing emails, which sounded similar, and it was around a similar time, but there's been nobody named or mentioned, you know. And I will say another thing as well is that a lot of these families pay the papers not to print it. The perpetrators' families will get into the media first and ask them not to. So I found that out because I was actually a victim of a sexual assault as a minor years ago, and that perpetrator decided to sell his story, and he printed the complete wrong side of the story when I was only 14, and because they didn't legally mention me when I was a minor, I couldn't actually take any legal stance against them. But that's how we figured that out years ago. It's a deep circle. There definitely needs to be more policies in place. There needs to be more help in the courtroom for the victim, because everything favours the accused. It's nearly putting the victim, they make the victim out to be the liar in the courtroom, and you have to prove that you're not a liar, not that he's guilty, you know. It was the anniversary of the assault there a few weeks ago, and I have to say it was probably the first year in the longest time that it hit me. It hit me the worst this year, but I think it's because every day is a closer day to his release, you know. So that's all I can do is just keep surrounded. I'm with good people. I've got great family and friends around me, and as long as that continues, I'm hoping I'll be safe, you know.
Thank you for listening to Jennie's Law, Sasha's story. If you have been affected by anything discussed in this episode, please reach out to Women's Aid or a local women's support organisation. You are not alone and support is available. In our next episode, we will hear from Amanda. a woman who spent years in an abusive relationship before finally finding the strength to leave. Although she couldn't take a legal route, her ex's occupation still gives him the opportunity to be alone around women, and she knows how important a law like Jennie's law could be.